Masqueras in Zimbabwe, welcome to our channels in Confessions and Deep Secrets. Kana kari kutanga kukuya panino channel, please don't forget to subscribe. Kana uchungwa gara uka subscribe, but don't forget to comment and share this video. Nasi mure Zimbabwe, tavigira nyano Anorwadza nyano sirisa nyaya Mafiro Akaita mkadzi wa Apostle Talent Chiwenga uyo ainzi Regina Chiwenga mure Zimbabwe uyo akashaika mugore 2019 mure Zimbabwe. Zvikunzi Apostle Chiwenga vakaita an accident iyo yakaclaima iyo yakauraya vanhu vaikwanisa kuita 3 mure Zimbabwe including his wife muna June mugore 2019. Accident irunzi yakaitika about 50 kilometers north of Masvingo mure Zimbabwe. So zvikunzi zvikunzi Apostle Chiwenga vakalose control of his Mitsubishi Pajero vehicle iyo yakabuda muroad ichi overturn 3 times mure Zimbabwe ikauraya ma-occupants anga arimo anokwanisa kuita 3 including his wife ne2 mamwe ma-congregants avanga vanavo zvikunzi vakashaika zvikunzi vakashaika vese mu-accident iyoyo. So zvikunzi papa ne2 ma-female passengers akafira paspot, then 1 murume akashaikira kuhospital. So during this accident Apostle Chiwenga vakakwara zvakanyanyisisa and vakaadmitwa varunzi vakaadmitwa kumukurira Memorial Clinic kuMasvingo mure Zimbabwe. Inova nyaya inorwadza, nyaya inosirisa. Ndofunga mukungoona ayo mapictures accident yacho arapo mure Zimbabwe. Ndo Mafiro Akaita mukadzi wekutanga wa Apostle Chiwenga uyo ainzi Regina mure Zimbabwe. So according to Apostle Chiwenga vakataura vachibuda vachiti this accident yakaclaima upenyu hwemukadzi wavo anzi it was an assassination attempt on him. Zvinzi maZANU-PF leaders ayo avaibuda vachiblasta masermons avo, anzi vana kufara nemasermons avo zvakakonzeresa kuti vade kuva-assassinata mure Zimbabwe. Tisingazive kuti munoiona sei nyaya iyi. There's a video yakaburitswa naApostle Chiwenga yavakarekodha from his hospital bed vachiblama this accident on macruel politicians. Vakataura ivo vachiti, if God wants me to live and continue with my assignment, he will save my life. I'm not afraid of dying. There is a better place than this place. Ndozvakabuda zvitauro naApostle Chiwenga. 2 weeks before this accident, Apostle Chiwenga vakabuda vakanyora a letter to President Emerson Mnangagwa vachicomplaina vachiti pane ma-state security agents aivafollowa mure Zimbabwe mushure mekunge vakapa prophecy yakaita kuti vanetsane naConstantino Chiwenga vachitaura vachiti paizofa 2 ma-high profile politicians mure Zimbabwe. VaChiwenga vakabuda vachitaura ivo vachiti kubva pavakaita this prophecy vakatanga kuteerwa nema-state security agents mure Zimbabwe. Vakabuda vachitaura vachiti about 20 kilometers after passing the toll gate, I looked around and everyone was asleep. My average speed was 100 kilometers per hour and the maximum I drove was 120 kilometers per hour owing to the fan belt problem. Then I saw a car coming from the Harare side. That car was swerving into my lane and I flashed the driver with my headlights to show him that he was doing something wrong. The other driver appeared like he wanted to have a collision with me. It looked like a Toyota 1-ton truck or Toyota Hilux, but it had a bumper on it and some yellow lamps on top of the roof. When I tried to avoid the other vehicle by leaving the road, both front wheels got into a ditch and went over a hump, producing a great noise. My car swerved back into the road, but I realized I was no longer in control. The steering wheel was more loose than it usually is. When we crossed the road, we faced directly into a tree. When I tried to turn the car back to avoid that tree, it overturned, and that was the last time I remember. I woke up an hour maybe. There were a lot of people around. Baba Kanyuchi said, don't mention your name. The assassins could be still here. People used X to get me out. It is sad to realize that my colleagues have lost their lives. I can assure you that this was not an ordinary accident. When we arrived at Beitbridge, the immigration officer took my passport and went away for about 2.5 minutes, saying he wanted to use another scanner. My suspicion is that there were people who knew we had gone to South Africa and they were waiting for us. Na Chiwenga, blame this accident on my politicians. This was foul play yakaitika muri Zimbabwe. Tikaziye kuti munoona sei nyaya iyi vakabuda vakataura zvakare vachiti, I don't think it was necessary for them to kill my wife. This is the cruelty of our politicians. I hope God is going to forgive those that are behind this. Those vakabuda vachitaura vaapostol Chiwenga mushure mekunge mukadzi wavo akafa zvinorwadza muaccident iyoyi muri Zimbabwe. Kasitaura kwatiriita Talent Chiwenga is now married to his new wife chingoti makorokoto anonzi Vanessa Nyasha Chiwenga, and pane mavideos akutrenda pa social media pavai-introduce his new wife muri Zimbabwe. Tisingazive kuti munoona sei nyaya iyi. Tiudziwo zvamunofunga pamusoro penyaya iyi comment section.
Chiwenga, I'm sure everyone knows me. Today is what, 11?
No, 18.
Today is 11 June. 13 to June 2019. I'm recording this video because I'm just about to go into theater to go through a surgery. I sustained a concussion on my head. I also have a broken arm, broken fingers, broken ribs. I was involved in an accident while driving from South Africa to Harare. We had gone to do services. We did a service on Saturday and then in Joburg, and then another service on Sunday in Pretoria. There were 4 of us, my wife, Mrs. Vurumuk, and Baba Kanyuchi. When we came into Mashingo, one of our fan builds broke up. So we spent 3 hours in Mashingo from around 4 to 7:30 fixing that problem. As soon as we had replaced the car with the fan build, we started to drive. So I said to Baba Kanyuchi, he was the one driving. He drove us from Joburg up to Mashingo. So I said to him, let me just drive until the toll gate to find out if the problem had rectified, because before we replaced the fan board, there was a funny sound coming. Soon after I drove, I then realized that the sound was no longer coming out. The car was driving well. After the toll gate, Baba said, let me drive. But I said to him, you can't drive, because from Mashingo to the toll gate towards Harare, from Mashingo, he had slept. And I felt that he was not in a position to drive, so I took over. And I drove around 20 kilometers away from the toll gate. I looked around and saw that everyone else was asleep except myself. As I drove, I was using an average speed of 100 kilometers. The maximum speed I drove for was 120. I did this because the fan board that we replaced was not a new one. So it was not wise for us to drive in a faster speed than that, because the fan board was also going to get broken. We only wanted to arrive to Harare so that we can buy stronger, brand new fan boards. So while I was driving, I saw a car coming from the opposite direction. I was going to Harare. It was coming from Harare side. That car swerved into my lane, and I flashed him with my headlamps to show him that he was doing something wrong. So he went back to his lane. He drove for about 10 meters towards me, and this time he just swerved back onto my lane, appearing like he wanted to have a great one collision with me. I flashed him several times. I rang my hooter, but he didn't show any signs that he was going back to his lane. Instead of going to his lane, I was afraid that I was going to come back to my lane, and he was going to hit me by my side, and the car was going to overturn more times. I also wanted to avoid a head-on, because it would have been more fatal. The car's front looked like a Toyota one-ton truck or a Toyota Hilux or a Ford T6, I don't know. We were driving, and so I couldn't, facing each other, I couldn't see the exact details concerning the car, but it had a bumper on it. I remember the bumper. It had round headlamps and some few yellow lamps on top of the roof. It could not have been a smaller car. When I tried to avoid him by going extreme left outside the road, there was no road there. So both my wheels, front and rear, left, caught into something that looked like a hump or a ditch. So the car had a great noise, bam, and then it went back to the road. At that point, I realized that I was no longer in control. The steering was more loose than it usually is. When you went into the road, it crossed again the road to face directly to a tree, which I knew that if I don't do something, we were going to hit against that tree, and it was also going to be unsafe for us. So when I tried to turn the car to come back, avoiding that tree, because of whatever had happened, I think one of those wheels was no longer in its right shape. The car overturned. That was the last time I remember what happened. I think it was about an hour later when I woke up. A lot of people were gathered around the car. The person close to me was Abakanyuchi, my wife and Mafiro. I didn't see them. Abakanyuchi said to me, "Apostle, don't mention your name. They are still here." That's what he said. So he was wet. His whole head was wet. But those that were assisting us, they said the blood on Abakanyuchi's head was not his. He was not bleeding. I was the one who was bleeding. So they then looked for axes. They hit the car until they were able to take me out. They rushed me to the hospital where I am right now. It is sad to realize that all my colleagues have lost their lives. My wife, Mafiro, and Abakanyuchi. And I can assure you that this was not an ordinary accident. When I arrived at Zimura border, post, they took my passport and they went away for it for about 2.5 minutes. The immigration officer was saying that he wanted to use another scanner because this scanner was no longer working. But I saw that it was a lie. Because before I went there, the person in front of me, he went to him and used his scanner to assist him and to put the stamp on the passport. And when he stamped my passport from another friend of his station, I also saw that after me, he went back to use his scanner. My suspicion is that there are people who knew that we had gone to South Africa and they're waiting for us. And those guys wanted to see if they can be able to inform anybody, whoever it was, that we were now at the border. When the car broke down, when we were trying to change the fan belt at Mashingo, at engine service station, 3 cars came, one of those cars, it was a Toyota Avensis beige in color. It didn't have number plates. It just waited for about 10 meters behind my car, and he drove off. Another point was a Toyota Hilux. It came again. The guy just wound down the window to the passenger side front so that he could see what was happening. After we fixed the car, we sought for fuel from the engine service station. We negotiated with them until they gave us so that we could fill our tanks. The other car came again and stood by while we were having fuel into our cars. When we started to drive off, that car drove off without going to the service station, but it used another direction than the one that we used ourselves to come to Harare. I wrote a letter 2 weeks ago on the 27th of May to President Mnangagwa to tell him that some people were chasing after me, they were stalking me, they were harassing me. We received calls from certain members of the CIO and from another member of the Military Intelligence Department of the Zimbabwe National Army. They warned me that there were people after my life. Some of them even suggested that I should run away from the country. So the accident that happened, I don't know if it's yesterday or the day before yesterday, it was not a normal accident. The men wanted us to get involved into an accident. Probably the reason why he didn't shoot me on the side, he thought that I died already, because I was the person who was trapped more than anyone else, and I was bleeding a lot. So I just thought I wanted to explain this. I don't think it was necessary for them to kill my wife, Mafiro and Baba Kanyuchi. If they wanted me, there are so many means by which you can kill one person than to kill some people who are around me who I love the most. This is the cruelty of our politicians. Now, I'm just about to go into a theater to get operated because my right hand is a fracture on the arm, and also 3 of my fingers are broken down. There's a big wound here. I was also bleeding from my eyes. I'm recording to say this. I hope God is going to forgive those that are behind this. And I want to thank God for everyone who ran around to attend to us, including those that came to the scene and delivered me. The ambulance took more than necessary to come and pick us up, to such an extent that it was a well-wisher drove me to the hospital. If that person had not done that in time, I'm sure I would also have died. I don't know who that person is. I don't know everyone who managed to help us. But all I want to say is thank you to them. If God wants me to live and continue with my assignment, He will save my life. But since I'm now going into the operating theater, I want to mention that Jesus Revelation Ministries is an assignment that God started. It will go ahead with or without me.